All right, great to be with everybody again on the great cloud of witnesses, and we're picking up where we left it off on chapter 18, and see if we get through 18 and 19 tonight. Chapter 19 takes a twist, so it's a little different from what we've been doing so far. It's a kind of a little anomalous. So hopefully, if we're on a roll, we will skate into it. So I'm going to as we do. Hook us up with Screwtape read by John Glees. There we go. Okay, tell me what you see.
The YouTube video.
What do you see?
The YouTube video.
Oh, good. All right, then that's it. We're all good. Okay, here we go.
Letter 18. My dear Wormwood, even under Slubgob, you must have learned at college the routine technique of sexual temptation, and since for us spirits this whole subject is one of considerable tedium, though necessary as part of our training, I will pass it over. But on the larger issues involved, I think you have a good deal to learn. The enemy's demand on humans takes the form of a dilemma, either complete abstinence or unmitigated monogamy. Ever since our fathers' first great victory, we have rendered the former very difficult to them. The latter, for the last few centuries, we have been closing up as a way of escape. We have done this through the poets and novelists, by persuading the humans that a curious and usually short-lived experience, which they call being in love, is the only respectable ground for marriage, that marriage can and ought to render this excitement permanent, and that a marriage which does not do so is no longer binding. This idea is our parody of an idea that came from the enemy. The whole philosophy of hell rests on recognition of the axiom that one thing is not another thing, especially that oneself is not another self. My good is my good, and your good is yours. What one gains, another loses. Even an inanimate object is what it is by excluding all other objects from the space it occupies. If it expands, it does so by thrusting other objects aside or by absorbing them. A self does the same. With beasts, the absorption takes the form of eating. For us, it means the sucking of will and freedom out of a weaker self into a stronger. To be means to be in competition. Now, the enemy's philosophy is nothing more nor less than one continued attempt to evade this very obvious truth. He aims at a contradiction. Things are to be many, yet somehow also one. The good of oneself is to be the good of another. This impossibility he calls love. And this same monotonous panacea can be detected under all he does, or even all he is or claims to be. Thus, he is not content, even himself, to be a sheer arithmetical unity. He claims to be three as well as one, in order that this nonsense about love may find a foothold in his own nature. At the other end of the scale, he introduces into matter that obscene invention, the organism, in which the parts are perverted from their natural destiny of competition and made to cooperate. Yes, his real motive for fixing on sex as the method of reproduction among humans is only too apparent from the use he has made of it. Sex might have been, from our point of view, quite innocent. It might have been merely one more mode in which a stronger self preyed upon a weaker, as it is indeed among the spiders, where the bride concludes her nuptials by eating her groom. But in the humans, the enemy has gratuitously associated affection between the parties with sexual desire. He has also made the offspring dependent on the parents and given the parents an impulse to support it, thus producing the family, which is like the organism, only worse. For the members are more distinct, yet also united in a more conscious and responsible way. The whole thing, in fact, turns out to be simply one more device for dragging in love. Now, here comes the thing. The enemy described a married couple as one flesh. He did not say a happily married couple or a couple who married because they were in love, but you can make the humans ignore that. You can also make them forget that the man they call Paul did not confine it to married couples. Mere copulation for him makes one flesh. You can thus get the humans to accept as rhetorical eulogies of being in love what were in fact plain descriptions of the real significance of sexual intercourse. The truth is that wherever a man lies with a woman, there, whether they like it or not, a transcendental relation is set up between them, which must be eternally enjoyed or eternally endured. From the true statement that this transcendental relation was intended to produce, and if immediately entered into, too often will produce, affection and the family, humans can be made to infer the false belief that the blend of affection, fear, and desire, which they call being in love, is the only thing that makes marriage either happy or holy. The error is easy to produce because being in love does very often in Western Europe precede marriages which are made in obedience to the enemy's design, that is, with the intention of fidelity, fertility, and goodwill. Just as religious emotion very often, but not always, attends conversion. In other words, the humans are to be encouraged to regard as the basis for marriage a highly colored and distorted version of something the enemy really promises as its result. Two advantages follow. In the first place, humans who have not the gift of continence can be deterred from seeking marriage as a solution because they do not find themselves in love, and thanks to us, the idea of marrying with any other motive seems to them low and cynical. Yes, they think that. They regard the intention of loyalty to a partnership for mutual help, for the preservation of chastity, and for the transmission of life as something lower than a storm of emotion. And don't neglect to make your man think the marriage service very offensive. In the second place, any sexual infatuation, whatever, as long as it intends marriage, will be regarded as love, and love will be held to excuse a man from all the guilt and to protect him from all the consequences of marrying a heathen, a fool, or a wanton. But more of this in my next. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
All right. There we go. This is a fun letter.
I'm not gonna lie. I totally forgot. It's like mainly only Catholic priests who don't marry.
Oh, I don't know about that. I went to the seminary with a man named Marty Bastian. He is and still is a Episcopal missionary in South America, and he is not married and never will be.
Well, he's missing out, but point stands.
I asked him about that myself because he was like 28, I guess 29, and see, so the call, if you look at the call to celibacy within the context of the organized church, it has been grossly characterized, and it's not a call at all. So a call is something that let's say very simply that God calls you to do something and then empowers you to do it. If you go do something and you're not empowered to do it, then that's not a call. So a lot of the priests, like in the Roman Catholic Church, for instance, have gone into the church and they're not called to be a priest in the church in the manner in which the Roman Catholic Church has priests, which is celibate. So since that is not their call, it winds up in a lot of terrible happenings in business, which we all know about from the news and all sorts of other stuff. The actual call to celibacy, which Marty has, is a completely different thing. And I did not understand it. I sat down with him one afternoon and said, Marty, explain this to me. And it's a call. He said, everything functions. I'm fine. I dated when I was younger. I just don't have any, it's not like there's no desire. There's a joy in me in not joining with another person in that way. I have ministered with and been on missionary journeys with women, and my joy with being with them is being with them as a missionary. But I find that's the joy. I don't have this joy in this other area. I just don't have it. It's not there. So that's a call. It's complete.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was on ecumenical council for a while, and I talked to Roman Catholic priests, and they always said, well, I don't have any desire at all. And, well, which is kind of a strange way to explain what historically the call is described at, like Marty describes it, as a positive. A call is always a positive. It's not a negative. So a call to be simply a call being identified as the lack of something is either they don't understand what they're saying or there's something else wrong in that. And again, we all know that the churches that have done that have run up into a lot of problems in several years because it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And because the men aren't called. And because they're not called to that, they can't stick it out. And bad things happen. All right, enough of that.
Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Even under Slubgob, you must have learned at the college the routine techniques of sexual temptation, and since the spirits of us, blah, blah, blah. So he starts off by saying here that the idea of sexual temptation, in my mind, immediately when I hear this, it goes to what people wear when they go out on the town at night. The emphasis is on body and as much of it as you can possibly see, and a lot of duding up and making up and like that. So it's basically just I don't know, for the one it's shopping, and for the other it's advertisement. It's very simple. So this is sexual temptation is everything that's transitory and fleeting in that. It makes everything that involved in that process is tearing the dotted line. It comes and it goes. There's no depth to it at all. It's nothing. But then the rest of this, great explanation in the rest of this about the exploitation at a very deep level of human desire, both physical and spiritual, and introducing this idea of love, and the misuse of that word as we use it, which is juxtaposed to this great line where he says, the whole philosophy of hell rests on recognition of the axiom that one thing is not another, and especially one self is not another self. My good is my good, your good is your good. When one gains, another loses. An inanimate object, he talked about that. I think that's brilliant. The self does the same. The beast, through absorption, takes in the form of food. So he immediately starts saying that the natural way of life is to consume one another, to control, to have functional control over each other. So if I don't consume you, then I control you. And we've all seen that. That's a pretty common thing, both in the most extreme forms, which are historic and current, and in the much lighter forms, but which are emotionally destructive. Let's say within the context of families, where one member of the family is domineering and basically steals the air from around the other person, just controlling them in all different areas. So that's a great witness to what hell is for us. Screwtape says that's exactly what they want, because if you think about this, and remember I talked about this on Sunday, if the mode of union and communion between two people, if the intention and the result is control, one person controlling another person, then that is antithetical to the Christian understanding of what it is to be in communion with each other, whether it's a marriage or a friendship. And I was talking on Sunday about Paul's letter to the Corinthians and the Philippians, where he's talking about marriage specifically, and in both places he comes down and says, marriage the union of a man and a woman, or the Christ and the church, is exampled by Christ giving himself up. Ultimate absolute service, 100% service. So he's saying the two people within the marriage need to serve each other 100%. And when I talk about this, when I've done marriage counseling, and I watch the people bristle a little bit, and I said, no, if you're thinking about it because I'm saying to you, you have to serve this person and give them all of you 100%. And the reason why you're recoiling is because you think that if you do that, they're going to be the master and you're going to be the slave. But what if you both are doing it? What if both people are serving each other at 100%? The result is miraculous. I mean, it would be, if it would be possible, it'd be like it'd just be incredible that both people could trust in and live in the context of the other person with absolute love and trust and fidelity, with absolutely nothing else. There's no corruption whatsoever. So this is love that Screwtape is talking about in the beginning of this letter, where he says, where God calls it love. Where is it? Oh, gee, where is it? Enemies demand either complete abstinence, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, ideal, party there. Okay. Oh, experience what they call being in love. Okay, so that's the transitory, one-dimensional business. That's, junior high school. And then it goes on to say, this impossibility, this is the enemy's philosophy, is nothing more than one continued attempt to evade the obvious truth. He aims at the contradiction. Things are to be many, yet somehow one. The good of oneself is to be the good of another. See, there you go. Serving each other at 100%, the good of me is the good of you. Mm-hmm. So if we're all doing that, and so he says, this is what Christ said, right? The good of me, and which is all good, 100% good. The good of me is the good of you. I give myself completely to you, and in my giving of myself to you, you are raised up. You have the chance to become the joy and the wonder that I am, that I've given myself to you. And he says, this impossibility he calls love. So this love is juxtaposed with the love on the prior page. The love on the prior page is that one-dimensional puppy love in junior high. Or it's the I love you after the second night stand. Which doesn't mean anything. I love you. And, it's nothing. It's junk. It's a complete corruption of the word and the intention and the everything. I mean, I could never imagine saying to someone, I love you, when I don't love them. Like, this could get caught right here. It couldn't go anywhere. But if you listen to young people around these days, they say it to everybody. They sign up the things. Love you. It doesn't have anything. It's just, it's nothing. But this love here, he's talking about within the context of this absolute service, the giving away of one to the other. So, of course, the rest of this, he is juxtaposing the physical act of sex and the approach to sex, the idea of sex, with the intention, and then with the backdrop of this gifting, this service, one to the other. And this is what lifts this up. And he goes to this place where he says, the only thing, interfere with false self. Well, he's got the Trinity in there, which is great. But yes, they believe that. Where is that line? Not say happily married. Oh gosh, where is it? It's a great line. I didn't circle it. Well, it's this one where he says that getting married for, or staying married, or developing within the context of a marriage to mutual support and to companionship and to felicity and to chastity, all of these things are not the reason to be married or to stay married. Did you catch that? On the first page, he says, being in love is the only respectable ground for marriage, that marriage can and ought to render this excitement permanent, and that a marriage which does not do so is no longer binding. That's divorce. right? So if the marriage no longer really checks all the boxes of junior high puppy love, then you can leave because it doesn't do it. But anybody who's been in a long-term relationship knows that that doesn't last, and it's not meant to last. It can't last. It's impossible to last. That infatuation love is based on not knowing. It's not based on knowing. It's based on this corrupted impression, not on a deep, abiding understanding. And when we move into this area, the depth of love, the definition of love, the ability to love completely changes. The question is, do we accept the changes and look for God's direction and purpose within the context of the change? Or do we hold on to the puppy love image, the transitory one-dimensional one over there, and begin to judge the marriage by that, and then finally just walk away because it's no longer doing that? And what I'm seeing, if I do that, is that I'm either unwilling or incapable because of the truncated way which I see relationships to move into this area over here, in which depth becomes a deep well. I can't do it. And I can't do it because I can't give myself. I cannot serve this other person. I cannot give myself to this other person. So I'm going to hang on to this transitory and fleeting emotional froth. I got to always feel this excitement and this emotional froth. And if I don't feel it, then I have to leave. Because I can't do this over here. You're too needy. I've heard people say that. I did a couple of years ago that just broke my heart. He came in with his wife probably the third time and sat down, and he said, after 5 minutes of sitting like this, finally said, "She's just too needy. You're too needy." And what she had been saying the whole time was, for like 15 minutes before that, was simply, if I could have broken it down, it was, I just want to be loved. That's all she was saying. But he could not hear love that way, because that was a depth of love, a deep, abiding, caring, nurturing, serving love. All he could hear or see was the lack of this over here, which is that junior high froth. And he called her needy because he can't give her that. He's stuck on the froth. So, all right, let's see. So one other place is great. This is an incredible line. It may be familiar to anybody in the way that we feel, but it is absolutely true from a spiritual perspective. And he says, the truth is that whenever a man lies with a woman, whether they like it or not, a transcendental relation is set up between them, which must be, I love it, eternally enjoyed or eternally endured. I tell you that the image of that, it maybe I'm going to use a movie or a book familiar to you. So in a movie, this may be familiar with you. You have a movie going along just fine, and the two people are in love, and they have a future ahead of them, and they go to a party, fancy swancy party down the road, or wearing the nice clothes, get a tie, all duded up, and when they get in there, the woman, after 5 minutes of being just happy as just kind of starts to act funny, tense, and then starts saying, hey, let's, I don't feel good here. Let's just go. Let's just leave. Let's go someplace else. Let's just be alone tonight. Let's just do that. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? We've been looking forward to this party for 6 months. What do you think happened? She looked across the party floor and she saw the guy that she had been with. And that connection he's talking about, internally endured. Now, they don't mean anything to each other anymore. She hasn't seen this guy in 3 years or 4 years, or he hasn't seen the woman in 3 years or 4 years, but they're still connected. And so when he or she sees the other, there is this gritty place where they go to, like, I'm totally uncomfortable with that person over there, because there is a connection that they're having to endure. And I've seen this and heard this in counseling hundreds of times, where it comes out as an active part of the person's life. So this type of thing happens with every encounter. So think about Think about people who have hundreds of encounters, the connections they have. And when you have that many connections, it has to get dumbed down. You have to become desensitized at that point. You cannot be sensitive to all of these connections that you've got, which begins to completely taint the rest of your life and make it impossible to get a depth of relationship. You've got to keep everything up here. Can't let it go down there. So brilliant.
Could this also apply to past relationships that didn't have the didn't make it to third base?
Yeah, the physical component. Oh,
Yeah.
I think so, but then the difference is that in this, what he's suggesting here, which is biblical, is that there's a third element that comes into existence in the context of the physical encounter. So it is like a baby. It's produced by.
Oh, no, I get that. It's just this
Well,
entire time I'm picturing my high school boyfriend, and I'm just
yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'd do that at the party. I'd be like, let's go right now.
Well, yeah, but the only difference is that what that is still a place of unresolved connection within us. Like if I saw my high school sweetheart and I had that feeling, it would be because there's a place in me, there's a door that's still open in me emotionally about my high school sweetheart. And if I saw her, I wouldn't know that right now because I don't care about her right now. But if I saw her, I would suddenly realize, oh my gosh, there's I can't remember her name, Rachel. There's Rachel. It's like, wow, there's a thing there. But that's in me. That hasn't been created and is something else. Like for instance, then I talk with Rachel. She's married. She's got 4 kids. She's got 3 grandkids. She's really happy. I meet her husband. He's a great guy. And by the time we part company, that door is shut. So it closed off. It put a period at the end of that sentence, which I didn't have before. And next time I see her at a party, I'm not going to have that feeling. But this thing that he's talking about here, you can't do that. It's created almost as a separate entity that has its own life, and you can't get away from it. You're stuck.
I'm not gonna lie. I see why people leave the group. I'm feeling very called out. It's good though. It's in a good way. In a good way.
Well, that's good. It's good to stick it out because it's just pointing out areas. Like what Screwtape does is point out areas
It's
of our life.
therapy. It's
Yeah.
therapy.
That's right.
Sorry.
No, it's good.
We're all in here with you.
Oh, here it is. They regard the intention of loyalty to partnership for mutual help, for preservation, for chastity, and for the transmission of life as something lower than the storm of emotion. Right. And this last one, this is, guilty as charged, this last line that he says right here. In the second place, any sexual infatuation whatsoever, so long as it intends marriage, will be regarded as love, and love will be held up to excuse a man from all guilt and to protect him from all consequences of marrying a heathen, a fool, or a wanton. So this is blind love, right? This is where you meet somebody who is, remember this in school where you met some guy or some girl and your friend said, he's a jerk. What are you doing? But you're like, but he's wonderful. And you're in love and she's fantastic. And your buddies are saying, oh man, stay away from her. That love, it blinds us and makes everything in us think it's okay, it's okay, it's going to be okay. I knew a woman for years, deeply involved with her emotional life for a long time, who married a man to save him.
Mm-hmm.
She fell madly in love with him, and he was otherly in lots of different ways, and they had problems years later after they had 2 kids. And she admitted, she said, I just believed that I loved him so much that when we got married, I could change him. I could save him. I could, make him a better man. And it didn't work. Of course it didn't work, right? So for her, when she got married, she even said, everybody told me. All my friends told me. My family told me. I did it anyway. And that's this love that blinds. That's, it's the excuse for everything. And then, of course, that's also the junior high transitory love that's fleeting. And when it fleets away, you don't have anything left. There's no roots to it.
That's a very human thing. As a kid, all my crushes, well, I could fix them.
Yes.
But
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to fix, right? We have there's an emotional stripe that's been built into it. So it's a godly stripe that says, I want to help, I want to serve, and fixing somebody is nothing more than wanting to give them help, to serve them. So that's an outward living of God's intention for us to serve each other. But we do it badly. If we're not really careful, we begin to serve the other person not as an expression of God's intention in our life, especially if we don't know God from that at that level. But I begin to serve the other person, like this woman, in order to bring them closer to me. So she was serving him to heal him, to make him new, so he would be more like her, and they would have a relationship together built on this sameness that she initiated, which didn't happen. So it's a corruption. It's in all of us, but then it does not. It can't bear its own fruit. This is why, again, going back to scripture, this is why Jesus keeps telling us, you got to come to me. I'm giving you a whole lot of stuff to do, and I'm giving you tons of information that you have got to act upon, but you cannot do it on your own. And if you try, it's gonna get all screwed up. The only way that you can do this is to do it through me. So he says, remember at the end, he says to everybody, I'm leaving and I'm giving you my love. Not as the world gives, not as you love. My love is different. And if you're going to succeed in my call to love and ministry is in relationship, you can only do it through my love. You can't do it through yours. You can do some of it and you'll tread water. You can do some of it and you'll say, this is as good as it gets. But my love will lead you into a place of ultimate joy. So that's the call, right? God calls us to something and then provides the method, or provides the energy, or provides the detail that we need to succeed. But we have to grab it. We have to take it. We have to accept the gift. And if we don't, well, it makes life pretty hard. All right, what do you think? 19. Want to hit on the 19?
Can I ask you about this sentence that I just can't get?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
The last sentence of 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph. You might have even explained it already, but it says, at the other end of the scale, he introduces into matter that obscene invention, the organism,
Yes.
which the parts are perverted from their natural destiny of competition and made to cooperate. I have no idea what that means. I'm like, what?
This actually has been talked about a lot. This is an old use of the word organism. Where is it here?
The last sentence of the 4th paragraph.
Last sentence of the 4th paragraph. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Starts with at the other end of the scale.
Right. So then we have to go to the front end of the scale. And the front of the scale is things are to be many, yet somehow one. Right? The good of oneself is to be the good of another. And that's love from a godly perspective. So that's the one side of the scale. And then he says at the other end of the scale, he introduces the matter at that obscene invention of the organism, which parts are perverted from the natural destiny of competition and made to operate. So this is moving from the idea of a spiritual, emotional connection to a physical one. So the organism that is joined together. I mean, in the context of this, a lot of the reflection on this is saying this is the actual ability of intercourse. It's the matching of men and women as puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly and are intended that way. So he's saying, if you remember, he said it earlier. He said, maybe he said it later. He said, oh yeah, His real motive is for fixing on sex as a method of reproduction among humans is only too apparent from its use. Sex might have been, from our point of view, quite innocent. It might have been merely one more mode in which a stronger self preyed, P-R-E-Y, upon a weaker self. But it's not that. So he's saying, this is the difference between these two beings, male and female, the opportunity for abuse because of strength and size and stature, and all these things. It's perfect from a hell's perspective, but God has made these differences between the two, and yet has had them cooperate in a way that for hell is completely it doesn't make any sense. But God has made it work that way.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you caught that. I was going to say something about that in the back of my mind when I was looking at this over again a couple days ago. I thought Catherine's going to ask about that. Yeah, you have an analytical mind, Catherine. So one of the things I've always loved about you.
Yeah.
How about 19? What do you think? Anything else on 18? All right, so I told you 19 has a completely different flavor. And it really does. It has it's not like 18 at all. Let me see if I can't get where are we? But 19. Okay.
If when you play piano, you have problems coordinating your hands or moving your fingers.
Letter 19. My dear Wormwood, I have been thinking very hard about the question in your last letter. If, as I have clearly shown, all selves are by their very nature in competition, and therefore the enemy's idea of love is a contradiction in terms, what becomes of my reiterated warning that he really loves the human vermin and really desires their freedom and continued existence? I hope, my dear boy, you've not showed my letters to anyone. Not that it matters, of course, anyone would see that the appearance of heresy into which I fall is purely accidental. By the way, I hope you understand, too, that some apparently uncomplimentary references to Slubgob were purely jocular. I really have the highest respect for him. And, of course, some things I said about not shielding you from the authorities were not seriously meant. You can trust me to look after your interests. But do keep everything under lock and key. The truth is, I slipped by mere carelessness into saying that the enemy really loves the humans. That is, of course, very impossible. He is one being, they are distinct from him, their good cannot be his. All his talk about love must be a disguise for something else. He must have some real motive for creating them and taking so much trouble about them. The reason one comes to talk as if he really had this impossible love is our utter failure to find out that real motive. What does he stand to make out of it? That is the insoluble question. I do not see it can do any harm to tell you that this very problem was the chief cause of our father's quarrel with the enemy. When the creation of man was first mooted, and when even at that stage the enemy freely confessed that he foresaw a certain episode about a cross, our father very naturally sought an interview and asked for an explanation. The enemy gave no reply, except to produce the cock and bull story about disinterested love, which he's been circulating ever since. This our father naturally could not accept. He implored the enemy to lay his cards on the table and gave him every opportunity. He admitted that he felt a real anxiety to know the secret. The enemy replied, "I wish with all my heart that you did." It was, I imagine, at this stage in the interview that our father's disgust at such an unprovoked lack of confidence caused him to remove himself an infinite distance from the presence with a suddenness which has given rise to the ridiculous enemy story that he was forcibly thrown out of heaven. Since then, we have begun to see why our oppressor was so secretive. His throne depends on the secret. Members of his faction have frequently admitted that if we came to understand what he means by love, the war would be over. We should re-enter heaven. And there lies the great task. We know that he cannot really love. Nobody can. It doesn't make sense. If we could only find out what he's really up to. Hypothesis after hypothesis has been tried. Still we can't find out. Yet we must never lose hope. More and more complicated theories, fuller and fuller collections of data, richer rewards for researchers who make progress, more and more terrible punishments for those who fail. All this, pursued and accelerated to the very end of time, cannot surely fail to succeed. You complain that my last letter does not make it clear whether I regard being in love as a desirable state for a human or not. But really, Wormwood, that is the sort of question one expects them to ask. Leave them to discuss whether love or patriotism or celibacy or candles on altars or teetotalism or education is good or bad. Can't you see there's no answer? Nothing matters at all except the tendency of a given state of mind in given circumstances to move a particular patient at a particular moment nearer to the enemy or nearer to us. Thus, it would be quite a good thing to make the patient decide that love is good or bad. If he is an arrogant man with a contempt for the body, really based on delicacy, but mistaken by him for purity, and one who takes pleasure in flouting what most of his fellows approve, by all means let him decide against love. Instill into him an overweening asceticism, and then, when you've separated his sexuality from all that might humanize it, weigh in on him with it in some much more brutal and cynical form. If, on the other hand, he is an emotional, gullible man, feed him on minor poets and fifth-rate novelists of the old school until you've made him believe that love is both irresistible and somehow intrinsically meritorious. This belief is not much help, I grant you, in producing casual unchastity, but it is an incomparable recipe for prolonged, noble, romantic, tragic adulteries ending, if all goes well, in murders and suicide. Failing that, it can be used to steer the patient into a useful marriage. For marriage, although the enemy's invention, has its uses. There must be several young women in your patient's neighborhood who would render the Christian life intensely difficult to him if only you could persuade him to marry one. Please send me a report on this when you next write. In the meantime, get it quite clear in your mind. This state of falling in love is not in itself necessarily favorable either to us or to the other side. It is simply an occasion which we and the enemy are both trying to exploit. Like most of the other things which humans are excited about, such as health and sickness, age and youth, or peace and war, it is, from the point of view of the spiritual life, mainly raw material. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Delightful. So I told you it was different. This beginning of this, of course, is all about Screwtape and his relationship. What did you gather from the beginning of this letter?
He's afraid.
He's afraid. What is he afraid of?
Being found that he's coaching his nephew.
Yes, and doing a disservice. That word heresy stuck out there, didn't it? He seems to be saying that all of his comment about that God really loves them cannot be true. He says it over and over, right? Because he cannot understand love in the well. They cannot understand giving, self-giving, one person to the other, not for personal gain, but giving one to another because we're one called by God to give, but also because we are loving, and not necessarily loving the other person, but loving God. So
Is Screwtape slightly nihilistic?
I imagine so.
He was like, nothing matters. Love doesn't matter. War doesn't matter. Education doesn't matter. Nothing matters.
You hit the end of the letter perfectly. This line right here, he says, like most other things which humans are excited about, such as health and sickness, age and youth, war and peace, it is, from the point of view of the spiritual life, raw material. So all of that, everything that he's looking at, now here's this is the shocking part, okay? In a sort of way, that is also true from the godly perspective, right? All of these things that we can do or not do, be in love, be in relationship, be in a companionship, be friends, be all these, a job, buy a car, own a house, all of this is just raw material. Why is it raw material? Because it is the place where we either live out our life in the way that's called and exampled by Christ, by God, or not. And so the life that we live then becomes the raw material of either living this way or living this way. So if I wind up married and my wife is fastidious, and my perspective on the world turns to all about the things of my life, about the pictures and the paintings and the wall color and the floor and the bathroom, and making everything perfect. Those houses where it looks like that they are they're a picture house. They look like somebody just made them up to take a picture in a magazine. Nobody really lives there. It's too perfect. I actually know a house like that. Their heart and mind and spirit, everything that they think about is about the house. So the house has become their fastidiousness has become raw material. And that raw material has pulled them away from living out this life of devotion to each other that's intended by God, and put their emotional and mental attention toward things of the world, not each other of the world, or each other in the spirit. So everything is raw material. It's how we live in it, live through it, use it or don't use it, what we rely upon, ourselves, our desire, our ambition, or on God, on Christ.
I'm sorry I'm talking so much. This is so fascinating.
No, not at all.
But it strikes me that Screwtape isn't entirely wrong, but he's drawing the wrong conclusions because he can't understand. It kind of reminds me of what happened in the last letter, where we were talking about how we have to agree on what a thing is.
Right.
And he can't do that because he can't understand the perspective of God's side, if that makes sense.
Yep. That's exactly right. It's exactly.
Oh, I feel smart.
Yeah. And we have this in our daily life, and this is the place of good communication that oftentimes we miss, and that is, this happens between parents and children. Probably the most obvious place is between parents and children, where the child will want to do something or have something, and the parent will tell them no and give them a reason, and the child has a fit. Now, if they're older, they don't have a fit. Maybe they're junior high. They just get that attitude. That attitude? Yeah, that attitude. And
you're the worst.
Storm around and ignore, because the parent has got a perspective, has got a larger perspective and understanding that the younger child doesn't have. The child doesn't have. And the child is incapable of contemplating, of imagining a perspective that's different from their own. So when the child says, I want this, and the parent says you can't have it, the child cannot understand the parent's perspective. The only thing they see is the parent's mean, because they won't let them have it. They don't understand that the parent's not being mean, that there's a greater perspective and understanding for why that's not a good idea. So this blossoms when we become an adult. I think I've told you this story before. I'm colorblind with some green colors. And after I found this out, and I found this out as an adult, because how would I know, right? I can see green. Well, how do I know that I can't see all the greens you can see? I don't know that. I didn't know that until my sisters and my mom showed me. Apparently, my father had the same thing. So once I found this out, and thought about it, I realized that I will never see the world as you see the world. I will never understand the world like when you look out the window. I won't understand that. How can I understand? I can't even imagine it. I have no basis for imagining what that looks like, because I don't understand green, those shades of green. I see the trees in green, but you see the trees in greens that I can't see. So this is an example, I'm using myself as an example, that we really cannot understand other people's perspective. We can't. We cannot put ourselves in their place and see the world as they see it. The only thing we can do is listen to them and understand the way they see the world, understand the way that they come at things, and then find the commonality of understanding between the two of us. So I don't look at people and say, well, you're awful because you can see more greens than I can, and I'm better than you are, right? That would be silly. I look at people and say, you know, that must be really wonderful that you, because I think this is beautiful. It must be incredible to you. Fantastic. And I actually was talking to somebody looking out at an overpass a couple of years ago, and I said that, who knew this. And after a few minutes of staring and looking at this, they turned to me and said, you know, I think I have a new appreciation for what I can see, because I'm just trying to imagine what it's like for you. You know, you find this so incredibly beautiful, and I can see more. So I should be able to appreciate this as beautiful and wonderful as well. And I'm having a hard time with it. So it led them into this place of introspection to find out what it was that they were missing in themselves, that they didn't take this vista in as something that was so fantastic. We have different perspectives. You know, we come at things from different directions. And it's simply impossible to say, I can see everything that you see and understand what you understand. I don't. It is the ability to come together in dialogue, to talk about it, and then appreciate it. I have a different perspective than you do, and I appreciate your perspective, and you appreciate mine. And that's the beauty. That's beauty. That's ultimately what marriage is meant to do, is to show forth that perspective of being able to have completely, because believe me, and I'll stop after this, believe me in saying that men and women, biologically, men and women have dramatically different understandings of the world. Not a little, completely different understanding. Not based on anything but biology. It's completely biology. So in this, it's impossible for women to appreciate the way men see the world. And it's impossible for men to appreciate the way that women see the world from a biological perspective. The only thing we can do is appreciate each other through the process of understanding, of dialogue, of recognizing. I look at myself and say, I just don't know how you see the world. And I want to learn. Teach me. And then you do the same thing to me. And we come together with this new understanding that, oh my gosh, you know, I've had couples do this and had them sit there in my office say, I've never known this about you. I've never understood this. Is that why you do that? Is that why you said that? I didn't. But in the moment when that happened, whatever that was, it wasn't a nice thing. They got mad. You know, they got angry at each other. And only when we're called to this place where we can understand this different perspective and let it loose is it possible to find this godly opportunity for communion and fellowship. Yeah. So this is you're exactly right, Auden. This is that understanding where he cannot see the perspective there. It's impossible. It's impossible. And you called it right on the place, because without Screwtape's the obvious extreme example, without that dialogue, without that ability even to talk about not understanding it, there is absolute division. Oh gosh. Is that the political world we live in right now?
Yeah.
If you can't dialogue,
Sure.
there's nothing, absolutely nothing. Yeah.
You have no dialogue, or you could just sit there and scream at each other the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's horrific world right now.
Do you
Love
think
Yeah.
that he does so think that, like, that he did say that the enemy's idea of love is that the enemy does love?
That's what he said. In fact, I'll tell you, it's letter 14. He says, where is it? Oh, okay. So he says, he wants to kill their animal self-love as soon as possible. But it is his long-term policy, I fear, to restore them to a new kind of self-love, a charity and gratitude for all selves, including their own. When they have really learned to love their neighbors as themselves, they will be allowed to love themselves as their neighbors. For we must never forget what is the most repellent and inexorable trait of the enemy. He really loves the hairless bipeds he has created and always gives back to them with his right hand what he has taken away with his left. And of course, that's a biblical quote, right? A little mashed up. So he's saying he really does. We must never forget that he really does love them. Well, we're finding out here in 19, that's heresy. Because he's saying, basically, Screwtape is saying, I understand. He really loves them, which means he understands godly love. But he can't. And if he does understand godly love, then that means he's a little too close to God, right? He's been tainted. Yeah, he's a heretic.
So is he lying? Is he knowingly lying when he says that?
Okay, so I'm going to pull you back to the beginning of the book. Let's see.
I missed the first 15 chapters.
That's all right. In the preface of the book, he says, readers are advised to remember that the devil is a liar. Not everything that Screwtape says should be assumed to be true from his own angle. And then he goes on, I've made no attempt to clean up the story. So
He's lying to his nephew.
Yes, he's lying and he's not lying. You can't tell where you see, okay, so now we've got a little inroad into this, right? He's saying that everything is not another thing, and everything is either being devoured or devouring, right? So which one is Screwtape?
Oh, okay.
So ultimately, he's the devourer of, or wants to be the devourer of Wormwood. So why is he helping him?
To gain his trust.
But if what Screwtape says is true, there's no way Wormwood would ever trust him, because Wormwood wants to be a devourer as well.
Well, you have to draw someone in to get your hands on them.
That's why he's afraid, because he's thinking, okay, I said this thing that makes me look like a heretic, and Wormwood could use it to get me. So that's why he's come back to him and says, oh, I really will take care of you. I'll shield you from the authorities. Just, burn my letters, lock them up. The only thing happened to them, because he's realized this. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It's because Wormwood can't be trusted. Nobody can be trusted. Everybody's a devourer or being devoured. And even if you are meat right now, your fantasy is being the knife and the fork tomorrow. You don't want to be on the plate. You want to be.
You're basically describing Waffle House here. I used to work there.
Yeah, this you start to see the complexity of Wormwood here, right? It's or of Screwtape. He for him to say this thing about God, he really loves them, means he at some level understands it. But he's constantly saying we don't understand. So which one is it? Is it possible that when he moves away from this very well manicured and produced facade of demon and devourer and hater, and gets to his more quiet moments, he gets in touch with his origin, which he's an angel, right? So he gets in touch with this place of creation where it's not all this stuff, it's just him and God. And when he's in that place, there is a sensitivity that opens the door up that he can feel and know God just a little bit. And if you
So you say that, and obviously he's afraid he'll be found out by his higher ups, but
yes.
Do you think he's afraid of himself, of what he
Sure.
Sad.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't want to
Right,
be.
too close to home.
You're brilliant on it. So if you think about the scripture, and you think about Jesus asking the Pharisees and the Sadducees questions, there's that place where he asks them, remember I said this in my sermon, there's a place where he asks them this question, and they've got to go into their own head and decide what the answer is going to be based on all this flotsam. If I answer this way, they're going to hate me over there. If I answer this way, they're going to hate me over there. If I answer this way, I'm going to sound like I'm better than he is. If I answer this way, it's going to be a mess. I'm not going to do it. So they're weighing all this stuff as how it serves me. But Jesus is asking the question because somewhere in there,
One light sense at last, be light. If no,
somewhere there in that process, there is the ability to have a chink in the armor, where there's a little pinhole through which that person feels or sees or knows that what they're doing isn't right. That's not good. That they're manipulating the other person and themselves, and it's bad. And for just a moment, they have a chance, to force that pinhole open and make it big enough to get through it and start a whole new life. And that's why Jesus asked the questions. So Wormwood or Screwtape has got that pinhole moment. It's right there. It's just, he's got it. He's in touch with that moment of love. It's just, what does he do? Does he go through it? Does he try to climb through it? Does he make a difference, or does he backtrack? And of course he's backtracking.
He denies, he refuses,
because
and he tries to run.
Like the Pharisees, it's because he's part of the group. He's in the crowd. He doesn't want to be ostracized. He wants to be one of the inside guys, not one of the outside guys. What would happen if he got kicked out? Where would he go? Well, he cannot imagine the place he would go would be heaven. He'd go back. He'd be made perfect and know everybody again and be completely fulfilled. But he cannot allow himself to imagine that. So he sells himself in order to stay in the group, the place where he knows that he's involved, or that he's
his own worst enemy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we do it too, right? This is us. Really, this is us. We do this all the time. We did this since we were little. When everybody wore a certain kind of shoes, and we ran out and bought them, or the pants and went out and bought them, or the car and went out and bought it, or their hair. We wore our hair a certain way because everybody wore their hair that way.
I was so mad when my mom wouldn't buy me light up shoes in preschool.
Yep. We've been doing this since forever. Yeah. And wait, our parents did it when they bought us the little blue booties or the little pink hat or whatever it was. They dressed us like every other little baby that looks perfect, so we were part of the in-group.
You have me in blue booties, Mom.
little brown shoes with laces, right? Little brown shoes. I still have my little brown shoes. My mom had. So yeah, this is a great little inroad. Thanks to Auden, we pulled some real straws out here to see this. There's a kind of a depth and a little cracking in Screwtape's armor that he's not very happy.
I knew my 10 years of therapy would pay off someday.
There you go. You got it. All right, looks like we got to close up, guys. This was really great. Any other last minute things before we go?
I think it's really interesting that he doesn't assign qualities of good or bad to certain human experiences.
To certain what?
Experiences, like being in love,
Right.
not good or bad. This or that, not good or bad. And I mean, it's kind of a brilliant way to look at things, though, because then when humans do things which we're going to do or not do,
Yeah.
they're not looking at that as, it's just anything we do is an opportunity to exploit, basically.
Yes.
Whichever way we go, it's okay. Doesn't matter.
Right. The question is, what's our exploitation going to be?
Right. But it's like you could take something good and make it bad, or you could take something bad and make it bad. I mean, I guess he's just basically not putting a good or a bad connotation on anything. Anything can be maybe one either way.
Albert the Great, who is Albertus Magnus, has written, wrote tons of books, but one of the ones he talks about is Cleaving to God is a great book, where he talks about and says, how do you cleave to God? Well, you cleave to God, that means, hold on to God, get closer to God, by looking at the world as everything that happens to me is a gift from God. I broke my arm, gift from God. How is that possible? How is that? He said, well, it's not that God's breaking your arm. It's not that God tripped you so you fell down and broke your arm. What it is that these things are going to happen to us because we're creatures living in this world. We're going to fall down and break our arm. But it's a gift from God at that moment because it's an opportunity for me not to be angry and scream and shout and break the chair and throw it away that tripped me, that made me fall down and break my arm, but rather within the context of the pain to turn and ask for God's presence and God's care and God's saving grace and God's ability to endure. And then when people come to care for me, it's an opportunity for me to thank God and to serve them the best I can. So everything is an opportunity to cleave to God, the good and the bad. It's not this why is bad things always happen to me? Well, what if you don't look at them that way? This is a thing that I don't want, but how can I find God, serve God, and be lifted up by God within the context of this thing happening? That's the raw material.
Has decided to say, instead of saying it's always something, she started to say it's always something good.
There, that's perfect. Yep.
And we're laughing because it's not good. And
Yeah.
we're like, okay, but it's something good. It's good. We're going to make it good.
Make it good. That's it. Brilliant. All right, guys. Great news. So we'll be back next week. We're going to be on letter 20.
Okay.
How many letters are there?
There are 36. Is that right? Let me see.
Ooh, okay.
So we're more than halfway. We have Screwtape prepares a toast. I always count that as one. 2 letters after that. So it's 31. 31 actual letters, and then Screwtape Screwtape proposes a toast, which we can listen to at the end. It is not part of Screwtape letters. It's added on, and he wrote that about, I think, 30 years after he wrote Screwtape. But it's Screwtape, so.
Okay.
All right, guys. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. Be well.
Okay.
Be safe, sleep well.
All right. Bye. Have
Good
a
week,
good
everybody.
Tuesday.
Thanks, Mom.
Bye.
I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.